So there's the job that you've chosen, and then there is the job that has chosen you, and that's your purpose work. And are they the same thing? And if they are, that's fantastic. If there is an opportunity to develop one over the other, that's important. So for me, when you see me serving, on my Instagram page or having those lives, that came from a place of service, which both of them do.
Dr. Angela, thank you for being on the show. I'm excited about this conversation. You have been such an inspiration to many of us online. Certainly the team members that you get to work with, I'm sure your organization would say the same thing. But talk to us a little bit about maybe an experience that you've had with burnout, just feeling like you're at your wit's end and how you overcame that feeling.
So we all have the days, right? I can tell you a date for one of mine. It was June 2nd, 2021. And I wasn't experiencing burnout. The house was burning down. I got up that morning, I took a meeting at 8 o'clock, like a lot of us do. And I was experiencing this just discomfort that I couldn't explain, that I had never experienced before. And I even tried to take more meetings that day. And it got to the point where I said, no, I have to go and see about this. And so I did. I had a difficult time finding someone who believed what I was experiencing. So I was sent to a second provider, who then sent me to a third provider. And so finally, when I got to the third provider, that's when I knew what was going on. And I just insisted, something is wrong. And so when you hear the words, you were minutes away, it changes your life instantly. And so what I learned after insisting on an x-ray and some other things with my husband, who's an MD, and insisted on the treatment and care, they said, well, you have pneumonia, you have a lung infarction, and you have a pulmonary embolism in the lower right lobe of your lung. And this was going from, what's my schedule today, to you've been sent home in critical condition twice. That'll shift your life. It will also shift your priorities. And so it's interesting because I'll tell you one of the lessons, and there were many that I learned from this experience. I came back to work against medical advice because, we feel like everything will fall apart if we're not there. And I remember the first day I came back and we were opening the call like any other call. And it's, no fault because people are in their own lanes. They don't know what's happening. And everybody did their greetings for the morning. And they said, good morning, Dr. Angela, how are you? And then they went to the next person. Having no idea that I spent the last 4 weeks fighting just to live. And so what that taught me was that the world will go on. And so one of the things that I say, and I learned from that experience, is that never again will I prioritize those to whom I am replaceable at the expense of those to whom I am not.
That's so powerful, Dr. Angela, because I believe leaders, particularly executive level leaders that lead high stakes, they're in high stakes roles. They may have budgets that are multiple millions of dollars. They lead a broad cross-functional team across several different business units, can relate to the feeling of like, there's not room for me to pause, drop the ball, any of those things, right? What would you say to that leader that's listening in on how that experience has transformed your action taking around self-care?
Oh, absolutely. So you can proactively prioritize, or you'll have to do it against your will. It's much easier to do the first way, right? So I try to incorporate wellness practices just in the course of the day, not just for myself, but for my team. So we do something that's called a mindful minute, where before every meeting, we pause and we turn our cameras off if we're virtual, and we take a quiet minute. You'd be surprised how long a minute can feel like when you haven't taken one in a while. We do something where we schedule focus time in the day, where we don't place meetings during that particular time of the day. So it's about creating a culture which eventually will become a habit where wellness is the priority as well as productivity.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a shift, but it's worked well. And so our team loves it. They love it.
Yeah. What are some ways that this approach of wellness and being more mindful about your own self-care transformed the way that you lead? Because sometimes I feel leaders feel like there's tension between the results, the KPIs, the things that have to get done. And then sometimes these conversations can feel more like, oh, that's a nice to do. That's flowery language. It sounds good.
Right.
But how do you make it practical?
So results are everything. We know that. That's why we have jobs. But I don't think it's one at the sacrifice of the other. I think you can create balance for both. And what I find is when I approach the people that I work with, my colleagues, as humans and not just the position or the role that they hold, they're even more willing to make sure that those results are exactly what we need to be, and even above and beyond. So I think it's a balance. You can't have too much of one versus the other, because I think that's where you run into the problem. But yeah, it works. And so we know that we have results. We know that we have lives to impact. I'm in healthcare, so we have patients that are depending on us, but we want to show up whole. And in order to show up as our best, we need to work towards that goal as much as we can. So there's room for both.
Yeah. Now you serve as the U.S. head of DEI, strategy and operations. Talk to us about the role that inclusion plays on this idea of wellness and how you can bring a more inclusive lens to bringing these wellness practices to your leaders and teams.
So we try to complicate it, right? But it's really simple. How can I include you if I don't see you? And so that means that we have to expand our scope. We have to make sure that we create space for people to feel, one, psychologically safe enough to show up as who they are, that they're comfortable enough to communicate what their needs are, and then we are proactive enough to put situations and solutions in place to address those needs. So it's not just about checking a box. It's not just about having that language that we've all heard. We want you to be your most authentic self. We want you to bring your full self to work. But what are we doing to make that possible? And so we put initiatives in place proactively, regularly, to make sure that it isn't just a narrative, right? We want a movement. We don't want a moment. And so we commit ourselves to that regularly.
Yeah. How do you see organizational culture playing a role in exacerbating some of the burnout that leaders are experiencing? This season of the Career Thrivers show was recorded inside of AB Hillsboro Village. In the rhythm of Nashville, AB dances to a tune of inclusion and community. Curated by Nashville's own Marcy and Derek, this premier live music and event venue harmonizes local flair with a very welcoming spirit. It's more than a space. It's where Nashville's diverse heartbeat is celebrated, making every event an inclusive masterpiece. Learn more about AB at anzieblue.com.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the pandemic during the top of this interview, and I think it played a big role because all of us, regardless of industry, we experienced significant change, transition, I'm sure an elevated level of burnout. We were coming out of a pandemic where we didn't really pay attention to what we were feeling. We just kind of navigated through it. So you had loss, you had illness in a lot of cases, you had financial change. And then the expectation was that you just come back to work like none of that happened. And so I think we have to have awareness. We have to be realistic about where people are right now. We have to have those open conversations and put support measures in place to help people come back to this new normal post-pandemic. But yeah, I think we just have to have direct, honest conversations and give people the space to talk about where they are so they can thrive, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to the woman that's listening in? She's like, okay, Dr. Angela, I hear you. And all of that sounds great, but I'm having some self-doubt because I'm not an executive level leader. I'm a mid-level emerging leader and I'm feeling burnout. I feel these signs of I'm maxed out. What would you advise her, or how would you advise her to bring up this conversation to her manager?
So it can be difficult, and we know realistically, right? You're not always in a culture or a climate where these conversations are encouraged, but it doesn't mean that they don't need to happen. And so even if you find, and you spoke at another episode around sponsorship. If you have those relationships within the organization, we can have someone help you navigate this culture. What you can't do is not have the conversation, because that's where we look at people leaving organizations or quiet quitting we've talked about. That's what happens. And so it's a must. And so look for those allies, those supporters within the organization to help start that conversation with you. But I will also say this, because it can be even difficult to have the energy to start. If you're burnout, you've passed a lot of streets before you got to burnout, right? And so I would say really try to recognize those symptoms earlier, because it starts with, I feel like I'm checking out a little bit. I don't know if I care as much about this as I used to. The things that used to brush off your shoulder, they're bothering you a little bit more now. And then eventually you get to the moment that you're like, one more person. And that's pre-burnout, right? So you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to the progression of how you feel earlier before it gets to that stage of burnout.
Yeah. Can you share with us maybe a time when you've had maybe someone on your team or someone that you've worked with kind of bring that conversation to you? And now on the leader side, how would you advise the leader to be an active listener in that conversation?
So first I would say, yes, I have had someone bring that conversation. On our team, it's a little bit different because we try to prioritize before. We want to be proactive and not reactive. That's not always the case. But I would say that you have to carve out time to have the conversation. We're all busy and we all have things that we have to deliver, but you never know how your ability to carve out maybe a 15-minute moment in your calendar could be life-changing for a person. And I've seen that happen many times, not just in the career, but also literally in life. And so 15 minutes is not a lot to sacrifice for something that could impact someone from now on.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been a leader in this DEI space for a while. So I want to tap into your opinions, your thoughts as it relates to the current state of DE&I. Where do you believe that we are now? And what would you say is maybe one thing that we need to focus on to really sustain and progress the work? Hey Thriver, I'm excited for you to get your hands on your copy of the Blueprint to More Visibility and Influence. This is a powerful free resource that's designed to catapult your influence and amplify your impact in your business or company. Now, this isn't just another online guide. This is your strategic companion that's going to walk you through the world of personal branding and authentic leadership. Inside, you'll unlock essential strategies that are going to help you do a few things. One, sharpen your self-awareness and own your unique story, navigate the complexities of workplace dynamics with more confidence, elevate your presence in any room, and ensure that you are not only seen, but also heard and valued. Why wait for opportunities when you can create them? With this blueprint, you'll learn how to cultivate a personal brand that commands respect and opens the door for new opportunities. And the best part, you'll start seeing the world differently, not just as a place where you fit in, but one where you stand out. You'll transform your self-doubt into more self-assurance and turn your aspirations into tangible achievements. So join me in our community of thrivers who are making their mark. Don't let this moment pass you by. Head on over to letsthrivetogether.com to download your free copy of the Blueprint to More Visibility and Influence today. Start your journey and let's thrive together.
Yeah, so from the space where I sit, we know that the culture is shifting, right? And so it's even more important. I know on another episode, you were talking to Dr. Bowtie, and he talked about sustainable initiatives. And so it's not about just having something that we're doing right now. So one of the initiatives that I'm really proud of, it's a 10-year commitment. And so we know that in this space, there are tides and there's flow. So we have to make sure that we're putting things in place that will last, that will impact more than just the people we see in front of us right now, but have the potential to impact generations. And so that's one strategy that we put in place very early, because we know in 2020, this was an area where there was a lot of attention and a lot of resources. And so we knew then, okay, let's make sure we create long-term initiatives. So that's one. And then I think it's just making sure that you stay really close to your leaders so they understand why this space is important and how it impacts the business. So if you don't have a DEI strategy, it impacts your ability to retain talent, attract talent. It helps with retaining the talent that's there so they don't leave. And so that really focuses on your bottom line, because it costs more for you to onboard someone that's new to the organization as opposed to invest into the associates you already have.
Absolutely. And you mentioned retention. In my mind, went to customers as well. I think sometimes we miss the connection to DEI and the business. It certainly is a business imperative because it can open you up to so many innovative ways to attract maybe a new segment of clients, but also to break into communities because you have that cultural relevancy that's reflected inside of your leadership team
Right.
to advise on the strategies that you're bringing innovation to.
Well, you have to. You have to have the community partners that are literally doing the work day in, day out. So yes, we have resources and we have advisors, but we're not there every day to do this work in these specific niches. And so our community partners are critically important because they tell us where we can create the most impact. And then working with them, we know because we can see the results and we see the lives that are being impacted. So it's important, particularly for us in healthcare, we help everyone. So we have to make sure we have a lens of what's important across diverse populations.
Yeah. And when we say diversity at Career Thrivers, there are so many different dimensions of diversity, and we try to do a really proactive job of educating that diversity doesn't only mean people of color. I think
Correct.
people's mindsets automatically go there. It also doesn't only mean gender. So there are these varying degrees of diversity, primary and secondary. But when we are specifically talking about women, just for a second, sometimes the feelings of burnout that are already present at the current level. So let's say this is an individual contributor, a high performer, they're in the non-box grid as high potential, ready to progress and move forward. But the talent, the actual woman doesn't want to move from that spot because she's like, if I feel this way where I am now, how in the world am I going to be able to manage 10 direct reports? What do you say to that woman who's already feeling burnt out? She's in an organizational context where the org actually wants to diversify their leadership team, but she might be causing some resistance from an organizational perspective on not feeling ready because she's burnt out where she is.
So here's the thing, that's okay. Everybody's journey is not leadership. We still need contributors at every level. And so if you're experiencing that burnout where you are, figure out why that is. You need to be proactive around addressing that burnout and then maximize. So, there's something that I say, maximize your link, right? And so this is our link in the chain. We had those who came before us who had a specific responsibility to create these opportunities. We have an obligation to those who will come after. And so your link may be middle management. That's okay, because then you can influence that level of the organization. And we need influencers there as well. So I think that's okay. Wherever you sit, for me, leadership is not about position. It's influence, right? So I'm sure you've seen leaders that have great titles, but maybe not the influence.
Sure.
And you've seen those who may not necessarily have the title, but they can create great influence. So I think that should be the focus more so than the title of the position.
Sure. What have you seen organizations do from a strategic standpoint, thinking about their operations, to better serve those women in terms of changing policy or different strategies to really help that individual contributor overcome burnout?
So for us, we actually have programming specifically for women. We have a program called Leading Up, which the entire focus of the program is preparing women who have that desire to elevate to higher levels of leadership. And that looks like coaching, it looks like assessments, it looks like assigning them a sponsor and a mentor within the organization to answer those questions or really kind of quell some of those fears that they may have around elevating. And so that's something that we've done at Novartis. And so we sit at 47% as far as gender balance with our leadership for women, but it took programs like Leading Up to say, what's the problem? Okay, what are we going to do? And then you have to do it, right? So that's one that we're really proud of. It is in its 24th year.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you all have ensured that that program also reflects the intersectionality of women of color, women across the LGBTQIA plus spectrum, to ensure that gender diversity is actually inclusive?
So we work, again, with our internal partners to make sure that we communicate the opportunity that is available. We are specific in our language that we want to have a cross-section of representation in the program because that helps add value and diversity of perspective, which of course we know elevates all spaces, right? And so we work with our ERGs, we work with our HR business partners, we work with multiple leaders across different business units to make sure that they help us identify talent that's representative of not just our organization, but also our greater community.
Yeah, and that's so critical because one thing that we see sometimes at Career Thrivers is organizations, rightfully so, you have a program that's been going on for decades, will be excited in celebrating that sustainability. But then when you dig in a little bit, you don't see that intersection represented in the women that are invited into those programs. And so it just provides an opportunity for leaders to be thoughtful about those lists, like making it really practical.
No, we
to
dig
ensure.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
We dig in.
Disaggregate the data.
That's right. It'll tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
You have to be courageous enough to look at it and then do something.
Yeah. Yeah. We know that the career thrivers that we work with are sometimes a little bit hesitant when it comes to really owning the power of their personal brand. We do a lot of work, a lot of curriculum, a lot of programs designed around personal branding, owning your narrative, speaking up, those sorts of, some people call them soft skills. We think of them as power skills. But I think you provide a phenomenal example of a leader inside of a corporate organization that masters your message, owns your voice, owns your brand, internally and externally. Talk to us about, one, why is that personally important to you that you show up as a leader outside of your organization as well as, of course, within?
So I asked myself, so self-evaluation is critically important, self-reflection. And I said, so there's the job that you've chosen. Mm-hmm. And then there is the job that has chosen you. And that's your purpose work. And are they the same thing? And if they are, that's fantastic. If there is an opportunity to develop one over the other, that's important. So for me, when you see me serving, on my Instagram page or having those lives, that came from a place of service, which both of them do. So when we were in the pandemic, I couldn't get out. I couldn't talk to people, which is something that I really love to do. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, I have to be creative. Let's strategize how we can still serve this purpose work, but in this realm. And so that's how those lives were born. In 200 consecutive nights, I was there having the conversations. And so that's what fuels my soul and helps me go into these spaces where I'm required to make decisions for others. It keeps me with that empathetic muscle built and that compassion for the people that I'm serving, because that's what leadership is also, it's service.
Yeah. And you do that so well. So make sure if you're listening in that you head on over to Dr. Angela Speaks, because whenever I see that live light up, I'm like, here she is, and she's going to be dropping some gems on leadership, on wellness, and it's so inspiring. So thank you for the leadership and the work that you do. What would be your final advice to leaders that are listening in that are like, okay, I'm tracking with what you're sharing. Dr. Angela, I really want to be proactive and really manage the stress, maybe the lack of calm synergy with work and life before burnout.
Yes.
What advice would you share?
So 2 things. I would say first, rest is a requirement. It's not a reward. Mm-hmm. We feel like we have to earn rest, and it just is so. And so you make sure that you incorporate those restful practices so you can sustain the energy and the strategic mind and the creativity and all the things that you need in order to do this work. And then the second thing, which was something that I really had to reflect on, particularly coming out of the experience I just shared with you, was that I am valuable and I am productive. Mm-hmm. I am not valuable because I am productive.
So good.
So just remember that, the moment you open your eyes, you've already fought the toughest battle because you beat death again. And so it's an opportunity for you to do something with that chance, right? And so, yeah, you woke up valuable and you woke up victorious. And so you're already valuable. Everything else is just extra.
I love it. And with that in mind, because I felt like that was a call to action, a charge to action, I'm like, okay, let's go. What would you say that thriving means to you?
Oh, so many things. Thriving is leaving people better than I found them. It is creating a legacy for my daughters. It is peace. It's peace of mind. It's peace of spirit. It is service. It is making sure that when that day comes a long time from now, because I believe your words have power, that people will say that they remembered that I was here and that it mattered that I was here. So that's thriving for me.
And you are definitely thriving. So thank you again for your leadership. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
So good.
you.